My parents stole the $68,000 my grandpa left me to fund my sister's dream. They thought I'd stay quiet forever, but what I did tore their fantasy world apart. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. When my grandfather passed, he didn't leave a eulogy. He left instructions, not for the family, for me, a private envelope handwritten taped to the underside of his old desk drawer, with my name on it in block letters. Cody, open this when you're ready. It took me 3 weeks to gather the courage. I'd just turned 21. Still living in my parents' house, still broke, still invisible. Grandpa had been the only one who saw me. The day I finally opened the envelope, I remember the rain, not a poetic drizzle, just hard, angry rain slapping the siding like a warning. Inside the envelope, there were 3 things: a letter in Grandpa's tight cursive, a printed document from a local bank, a yellow sticky note with a 6-digit code, and the words "Locker Me 914 Southlake Storage." My hands were shaking. I read the letter first. Cody, you've always been the one who sees through the noise. This is yours. I'm proud of you. Don't tell anyone, not even your mom. Not until you have it in your hands. Love, a pop. That was it. No long goodbye, just purpose. The bank slip had a title at the top: certificate of deposit, $68,000. Grandpa had left me his savings. All of it. I wasn't expecting a dime. I locked myself in my room and Googled what a certificate of deposit even was. I barely knew how to open a bank account. I'd been building indie games on my used ThinkPad, eating dollar noodles, doing freelance jobs just to save for a real computer. And now this $68,000. It didn't feel real, so I waited. Like Grandpa said, I waited until I could figure out what to do. The next morning, I went to the Southlake storage unit listed on the note. It was this aging row of metal lockers behind a Dollar Tree. The kind of place where the pavement is cracked and the doors shriek when you open them. Locker Me 914 was almost empty, except for a small fireproof box, the kind you keep deeds and insurance papers in. I entered the 6-digit code from the sticky note. The latch clicked. Inside, an empty folder, just a manila folder, blank, with nothing in it. My blood ran cold. No papers, no CD, no will, no receipt, just the faint imprint of what had been there, a single rectangular shape, like something had been slipped out carefully. I stood there for a long time, just staring at the box. Something was wrong. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew the moment I saw that empty folder someone had gotten here before me, and there were only 2 people who could have known: my parents. I didn't say anything for 2 days. I kept replaying the storage unit in my mind. The empty folder, the perfect rectangle of dust where something used to sit. I even checked the locker again. Nothing. That night, I sat through dinner with my parents, watching them act normal. My mom laughing too loudly at one of my dad's dumb work stories. My sister Tina flicking her phone screen under the table, probably FaceTiming with someone in sign language. Everything looked the same, but it felt off. Then I heard them. It was 1:30 a.m. I'd gotten up to grab water. Their bedroom door was cracked open, just enough for sound to escape. Mom's voice, low but sharp. We agreed not to say anything. It was either fund her project now or it's fall apart, and it's not like he was doing anything with it. He barely leaves his room. Dad, it's not that simple, Mare. That account was supposed to be frozen until Cody turned 25. You made me break into the lockbox. Silence, then her again. And do you see him out there changing the world? No, he's playing pixel games in the dark. Meanwhile, your daughter has a real shot. Don't guilt me now. I stood in the hallway, barefoot, shivering. I didn't need to hear more. They took it. The $68,000, every last dollar Grandpa left for me, used to fund Tina's dream, whatever that meant. I didn't even wake her up to ask. She wouldn't know. Tina had always lived in her own world, quiet and creative. Wrapped in her art. She didn't know what they did, I was sure of that. But they did. I curled up in bed that night, eyes wide open. They'd robbed me, my own parents, and they weren't sorry. They were justified in their minds. Like it made sense to gut my future because I wasn't doing anything. The next morning, I opened my laptop and searched the account number from the bank slip. Invalid. I tried the branch listed on the certificate. I called them. The guy on the phone, Matt, sounded bored until I gave him the number. Then he paused. Sir, that CD was withdrawn 4 weeks ago. In person. Withdrawn by who? I can't share that without account access or ID verification. I am the recipient. But your name's not on file. He hung up after repeating bank policy. But that told me everything I needed. Someone had walked in and taken it. And if the folder was gone from the lockbox before I ever touched it, there was no doubt. They planned this. That night, I waited until the house was dead quiet. Then I snuck into the garage. Dad's filing cabinet was locked, but not hard to crack with the thin magnet strip I'd used once to open my old locker when I lost the key. Inside, I found a folder labeled investment transfers. Tucked in the back was a carbon copy of a check, $68,000, made out to Meredith Barnes, Memo Consultant Project, TBTB, Tina Barnes. I stared at the ink until my eyes blurred. They didn't even try to hide it. They used Grandpa's money, my money, to launch something for Tina. And made sure I couldn't trace it, but I just did. The next morning, I didn't wait. I slammed the check copy on the kitchen table. Mom was slicing strawberries. Dad was nursing his coffee. Tina was still upstairs. I didn't raise my voice, didn't curse. I just said, "What the hell is this?" Dad barely glanced at the paper. Watch your tone and know you watch my future circling the drain. Mom sighed and turned around slowly, wiping her hands on a dish towel like she had all the time in the world. We told you, Cody, you've been aimless. Tina needed a push to get her art residency off the ground. It was now or never. So you stole from me. Don't be dramatic. That money wasn't even technically in your name yet. Your grandfather made it complicated. She paused, accelerated the timeline. My throat burned. It was never yours to touch. Dad stood. He always did that when he wanted to seem big. It was a family decision. You want to play victim now, but where have you been the last 2 years, huh? Locked in that room. We gave you a roof, food. Internet, you think that entitles you to 68 grand? I didn't flinch. Grandpa thought so. Grandpa was old, sentimental. You were always his favorite. He wasn't thinking straight. That one hit like a punch. I turned to Mom. Did you even ask Tina? She blinked. Ask her what? If she wanted to build her dream off stolen money. Mom rolled her eyes. She doesn't need to know. Something in me broke. They weren't sorry. They didn't even think it was wrong. Just an adjustment. A reshuffling of family resources. Because I wasn't shiny enough. Because I didn't dance the way Tina did. Didn't smile for photos. Didn't win them approval. I walked away. Not because I was done, but because I wasn't. That night, I messaged Danny. He was my only real friend since high school. We used to build game mods together. He was living in a cheap apartment over on Walden Street, scraping by doing Huck's work for CryptoBros. We hadn't talked much since graduation, but he always had my back. He replied in less than a minute. Danny, you okay? Me not even close. Danny, come over. I packed my laptop, Grandpa's letter, and the check copy. When I got to his place, I didn't sugarcoat anything. He listened, didn't interrupt once. Then he said something I didn't expect. You still have the storage unit key. Yeah, why? Because people like your dad don't leave digital footprints. But they might leave paper ones, and that's when the idea hit. If they had the balls to use my name to steal the money, maybe they forged something. Maybe they signed something. Maybe there was a trail they forgot to erase. I was done asking for fairness. It was time to build a case. Danny drove us to the storage unit just after midnight. We waited until the lights in the front office went out. No cameras, no night guard, just rows of dented lockers baking in the darkness. I used Grandpa's old key to open Unit Mina 14 again. The box was still there. Empty folder still inside, but Danny didn't stop there. He crouched, running his fingers along the floor of the unit. These old boxes have double walls. You'd be surprised what gets forgotten. He pressed gently on the left panel. It gave a little behind it. A shallow hollow with a single folded page wedged between the sheet metal and the wall. It was brittle, smelled like engine oil, and it had my name on it. Only it wasn't my signature. It was a power of attorney form, dated 8 months ago, with my name typed at the bottom. And a signature that looked close enough if you didn't know me. I'd never seen that paper in my life. OSH, Danny whispered. He held it up to his phone light. This is how they did it. They forged POA. Gave them legal authority to access the CD before maturity. My throat tightened. They planned this. They didn't stumble into the money. They engineered a fake paper trail months in advance, like they knew I'd never fight back. Danny looked at me. You ready to burn them? I didn't answer. I was already thinking 4 steps ahead. Back at Danny's, we scanned the document, ran it through an online forgery detection site. The signatures, pressure curves didn't match any of my known files. I still had an old driver's license from when I was 17. We lined it up. It was off just enough. This won't hold up in court, I said, but it's a start. Danny nodded. Then we don't go to court yet. We go digital. We set up a private workspace, locked folder backups in 3 clouds, a new email under a pseudonym, and one goal: build the timeline, step by step. Like a detective game, Grandpa's deposit released to private storage. Parents access storage first. Remove original folder. Forge power of attorney. Present forge doc to bank. Transfer funds to Meredith. Redirect funds to TB account. We didn't have the last 2 links. But I knew where they might be. Dad's work laptop. The one he never let anyone touch. He ran its systems for a mid-sized security firm, enough access to cover digital tracks, but also store them. That laptop was my next target. But I had to play it cool, pretend like nothing was wrong. The next day, I showed up for dinner, smiled, asked about Tina's exhibit, ate everything on my plate, even offered to do dishes. They bought it. Dad even left his laptop charging in the living room. At 2:12 a.m., I crept downstairs. At moment I cracked it open. The fan whirred like a jet engine. I almost jumped out of my skin. His password hint popped up. Her name, year we met, I guessed Meredith in 95. I was in. Dad's desktop was a minefield of spreadsheets, log reports, and boring company documents, but tucked in a hidden folder under a renamed zip file, labeled car calibration notes. I found something else: a def scan. It was the original forged POA form, this time with digital metadata. Created 5 months ago, modified by J. Barnes Software DocuSign editor internal. The signature field was marked manually inserted. I wasn't a legal expert. But this was enough to make someone ask questions. And then I found the thread. In his company email inbox, there was a sent message to First Fort Bank Compliance. Subject: urgent transfer request. Attached: forged POA. A scan of Grandpa's bank certificate. and a short message attached is the POA form for my son Cody Barnes. He has authorized me to process this transaction on his behalf as he's unavailable due to personal matters. Below it, a reply from the banker: understood. Funds have been dispersed to him. Barnes as requested. Please confirm all parties are in agreement. Dad had replied all approved. That was it. A clean lie. And it worked. I copied everything: screenshots, emails, metadata, and dumped them onto my USB. But just as I was encrypting the folder, the laptop screen blinked. Then the cursor froze. I stared at it, confused, until the system started logging off. Remote shutdown. He was watching me. I yanked the USB out mid-transfer and booked it upstairs. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I buried the USB in a sock drawer under a pile of old receipts and wrapped it in tinfoil, just in case he was tracking drives. 5 minutes later, I heard it: heavy footsteps. My door burst open. Dad stood in the hallway, in boxers and a t-shirt, holding the now-shut laptop. You touched my work files. I didn't speak. Mom appeared behind him, eyes wide. Cody, what's going on? I stared at them both. They were trying to intimidate me, reassert control. You forged my name, I said flatly. I saw the emails. You lied to a bank. You misunderstood. Dad started, but I cut him off. You lied. You stole from me, and now you're trying to cover it up. His face twisted. That's not how this works. You're right. It's how court works. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You think you'll win against your own parents? In this town? With what, some half-downloaded file? He was calm, too calm. I realized then he's done this before. Maybe not with me, but with someone. He knew how to discredit, how to vanish data, how to win quietly. You always were good at hiding things, I whispered. And you, he replied, were always just a mistake we made out of pity. My chest cracked open at that. Mom didn't say a word, didn't move, just stood there silent, complicit. The next morning, the laptop was gone. So was the desktop PC and all backup drives from his office. They'd nuked the evidence, and I was back at zero. Even Danny was hesitant when I texted. This is getting too deep, man. If your dad's willing to erase devices, who knows what else he'll do. I have the USB, I typed. But I didn't get all the files, just some screenshots. You need someone who can help for real, like legal help. But who would believe me? A broke indie dev with shaky screenshots. That night, I opened my sock drawer. The USB was gone. My blood turned to stone. The USB was gone. I opened my sock drawer that morning and found only air. No scratch marks, no signs of rummaging, just absence. My mother was in the kitchen humming like nothing had happened. My dad had already left for work. I texted Danny, me, the USP's gone. Danny, dude, I'm sorry. Maybe it's time to let this go. Me, are you serious? Danny, I can't get dragged deeper. Your dad's not someone I want to cross. I didn't reply. He was right. But I felt more alone than ever. I spent the day at the public library, hunched over my old ThinkPad. All I had left were some half-baked screenshots, cropped email headers, file metadata. Nothing anyone would take seriously in court. Then a ping lit up my Discord. Kristen Foster, hey, you still alive? Haven't seen you in dev chat. Kristen, she'd worked with me during an indie game jam last year. Sharp-eyed, sharper-tongued, and brilliant with 3 dart. We hadn't spoken in months. I stared at her message, then typed, you busy? Define busy. What's up? Can you recover a deleted file from a USB drive that might have been tampered with? A few seconds passed. Meet me at Junction Cafe, bring the drive. I didn't have the USB, but I had the ThinkPad and the screenshots. She was already at a corner table when I arrived, black hoodie, hair up, stylus tapping against her iPad screen when I sat down. She looked up and gave a low whistle. Damn, you look like you haven't slept in days. I haven't. I didn't hold anything back. In 10 minutes, I told her everything. She listened without a single interruption. Then she leaned over, fingers dancing on my laptop's trackpad as she opened the image files. You're done, some moron, she muttered. You can tell that just from the screenshots. Look here, he left metadata traces. See this signature? It's from a cloud signing service. And this weight matches a document that passed through Dropbox Business, probably his work account. You can see that only if you know where to look. My chest tightened. So you think the original file still exists? She nodded. Dropbox logs everything. Even if he deleted the document, the system retains metadata, maybe even a cached version. But I don't have access to his Dropbox. It's encrypted. I don't even know the username. Kristen smirked. Then we social engineer a reset. I blinked. You're serious? Dead serious. If your dad forged your name and submitted documents using a corporate cloud system, that's an audit trail, one we can pull. She paused, looked at me. So you in or not? I couldn't speak for a second. Then I said it, clear and steady. I'm in. She grinned. Good, let's take him down. We didn't waste time. Back at Kristen's apartment, walls covered in art prints, 2 monitors glowing in the dark. She pulled up a spreadsheet faster than I could sit down. Okay, she said, cracking her knuckles. We're looking for a file that passed through Dropbox Business, signed via Cloud Editor, between May 6 and May 9. That's our window. Yeah, that's when the forged POA got used. Cool, let's ghost him. Kristen pulled up a browser and launched a script she'd written for metadata crawling. It wouldn't get us into the account, but it could ping Dropbox's API for file activity associated with a known void, just enough to trace whether the file still existed on their server. I gave her the document id from the screenshot docsig 978417 a POA Barnes. She ran it. The terminal blinked, then archived limited view. Exists in admin logs. Kristen whooped, bingo, what does that mean? It means that file's still on Dropbox's backend. He deleted it from his device, but it's archived under the business admin panel. And if we're lucky, it was generated using his company's compliance tools. And she turned to face me fully. And if we can get a subpoena or a credible inquiry, we can request the full audit trail, including timestamps, IP addresses, signatories, and transfer history. It's not just metadata anymore. It's proof, from a neutral third party. My hands trembled. That's the second-tier evidence, she nodded. Exactly. It can't be faked, can't be manipulated, and definitely can't be dismissed in court. We sat in silence for a moment. It was the first time since the day I opened that empty folder that I felt like I was standing on solid ground again. Then Kristen said something that hit me hard. You know this isn't just about the money anymore, right? I know, you're not just proving they stole from you. You're proving they underestimated you. Later that night, Kristen reached out to a friend of hers, Derek Mitchell. Someone I'd only vaguely heard of through dev circles. He worked in digital compliance consulting, helped whistleblowers secure evidence trails, the kind of guy companies paid not to talk. We sent him the metadata, the screenshots, the evidence we had so far. He called back the next day. It's enough to file an inquiry. Will Dropbox cooperate? Kristen asked. If you file through the right legal language, yes, and if the account's under a verified business, they're required to maintain logs for 7 years. You just found the bullet in the chamber. But how do we serve it? I asked. I don't have a lawyer. You do now, Derek said. I'll draft it under data access rights. Technically, your name's in the file's signature block. That gives you partial claim to request audit data, even if the signature was forged. Especially if it was. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the drive my dad thought he erased, about the storage unit, about Grandpa's note, about Tina's smile when she showed off her new studio space, completely unaware that her dream was funded by my silence. But I wasn't silent anymore. I pulled out my phone and wrote a single line in my notes app. Let them think they've buried you. You're the seed. 3 days later, it landed. Kristen forwarded me the file at 3:42 am. Subject line: Dropbox Forensics Export Audit Inquiry Doc Sig 978,417 Poa Barnes. I opened it alone. The report was 23 pages long, dense with timestamps, hashes, and server pings. Kristen had highlighted the important parts. Page 6 IP 192.6422 device Barnes home PC user Meredith Barnes secure company net timestamp May 7/11/18 am. Action signature field edited manually. Page 10 change log document title changed from authorization def to Poa Barnes final def IP match Meredith Barnes secure company net. Page 12 download attempt external backup to devices Menace 241 CB unsuccessful timestamp 2 days ago. She tried to delete it. Tried to move it, but the cloud remembered. And the best part, attached to the report was a flag from Dropbox's internal fraud detection algorithm. A passive scan had auto-flagged the file due to mismatched digital signature data. It was enough. Kristen sat across from me, legs crossed under her chair, sipping bad vending machine coffee. She was in on it the whole time. I whispered. Yep, she said, not looking up. She typed your name, she signed it, she changed the file name. It's all there. They both lied, and now you've got the receipts. My stomach was tight, but not from fear. It was adrenaline, a different kind. So now what now? Kristen said, closing her laptop. You take this to someone who can make noise. We sent everything to Derek. Within 12 hours, he'd submitted a full fraud complaint to First Fort Bank's compliance board. Then we sent the file to Aunt Susan, the only adult in the family who had ever been remotely decent to me. She was a retired paralegal, knew how the system worked. She called me immediately. Cody, she said, her voice trembling. This is serious. This is jail time serious. I'm not looking to get them arrested. You might not have a choice. I didn't go home for 5 days. I stayed with Kristen, sleeping on her futon under a quilt that smelled like vanilla and acrylic paint. Every day, new dominoes fell. The bank froze my mom's accounts. Tina called me, confused and scared, asking why mom was sobbing in the living room. A letter arrived at my old address. The inheritance had been placed under a legal freeze pending inquiry. The school's scholarship board contacted me about concerns regarding guardianship manipulation. By the end of the week, I got a call. It was from the district legal coordinator. Mr. Barnes, we've reviewed the materials submitted by Mr. Mitchell. We'd like you to come in Monday morning. We'll be speaking with your parents separately. I didn't tell them I was coming. I just showed up. They were already sitting there, mom pale and shaking, dad looking like he hadn't slept in days. The legal rep placed the Dropbox audit file on the table. We've confirmed this document was altered using your household network. Both your user IDs appear on the record. Dad's mouth opened and then closed. Mom leaned forward. He's lying, she said, voice sharp. He probably faked that report. He's always been ungrateful. The rep didn't even flinch. Dropbox logs cannot be altered by end users. The logs are certified by federal compliance standards. Silence, then I spoke. I was never your priority. You just needed me to shut up and stay in the corner. We did this for the family, Mom snapped. Your sister needed, she didn't ask you to steal from me. I pulled out Grandpa's letter, laid it gently next to the audit report. He left it to me, because I was the one who stayed with him, the one who saw him. Mom looked at the letter like it burned. Dad leaned back in his chair, quiet for once. The coordinator cleared his throat. Due to the severity of this matter, the bank is launching a full investigation into financial misconduct and fraud. The certificate is now being returned to the rightful recipient, Cody Barnes. I never moved back home, not even to pack. Kristen and I stopped by once, weeks later, just to collect the last of my things. Tina met us outside. She looked tired, smaller somehow. She handed me a small box without a word. Inside were some of Grandpa's coins, a photo of me and him fishing, and the original folder, the one from locker Mina's 14, still empty, but this time I knew why. I'm sorry. Tina signed slowly. Her hands trembled. I hadn't seen her this emotional since we were kids. They told me the money came from life insurance, she added. That it wasn't yours, it was, I said quietly. But I don't blame you, she nodded, then looked me in the eye. I want to pay you back. Every dollar. No, I said. Just never be like them, she hugged me. For the first time, it felt like family. I used part of the recovered savings to start a game studio. Just Kristen and me at first, late nights, bad coffee, debugging over takeout. We named the company Folder Fortin. It felt poetic, a symbol of how something that started empty could hold everything. By spring, our first demo was up on itch.io. We were getting attention, publishers were calling. Kristen joked that our trauma paid for itself. You got screwed, she said once, but you didn't stay broken. We live small, shared an apartment, built slowly. Grew. Tina even joined us months later, not for money, but to handle our accessibility designs. She's gotten good at UX for deaf players. Grandpa would have loved that. As for my parents, I haven't heard their voices in almost a year. There was no big courtroom showdown. No jail time, just public silence, frozen accounts, a family name that stopped opening doors. That was enough for me. I got an apology letter once, from my mom, long handwritten, full of qualifiers like we thought we were doing what was best. I never opened it. I just slipped it into the manila folder and closed it shut. Today, that folder sits in my desk drawer, not empty anymore. Inside, the letter from Grandpa, the audit logs, a printout of our first check from our publisher, a group photo of me, Kristen, and Tina, arms linked, laughing, blurred by motion, and a sticky note stuck to the inner flap. You were never the backup plan. Hop, thanks for watching. Hit subscribe to check out more stories on my channel.